29th of April, and welcome along to those of you joining us live for this edition of Pandemic Perspectives. Today brought to you jointly by ICAEW Birmingham and West Midlands District Society and by the London Society of Chartered Accountants. I'm Angus Farr, and like many of you tuning in, I'm an ICAEW member working in business, and I'm also one of the volunteers on the LSCA Business Board. Now, Pandemic Perspectives is a UK-wide series of events to hear from a range of interesting individuals about how they and their organisations have coped with COVID, what they've learned from those challenges, and importantly, what changes they are making to adapt to whatever lies ahead. Now, just as this is a joint event between the Birmingham and London societies, so our guest organisation today, Lumify Energy, is a joint undertaking between husband and wife team Travis and Freccia Ben. Lumify Energy, recently rebranded from Accounting for Energy, helps UK landowners and site operators get the most value from their renewable energy products or projects. Their award-winning platform marries the financial, commercial, and legal aspects of renewable projects, empowering their clients to make cleaner decisions and clearer decisions. Lumify Energy have built huge expertise in renewable energy payments, creating a simpler, more transparent, and mutually beneficial renewables sector. Now, it's certainly not just me, Freccia, and Travis calling the shots today. We are keen to get you involved as well. We know we've got a fantastic audience today, drawn from practice, the public sector, financial services, and academia. Now, there is time for your questions to our guests today. And if you haven't already sent one in, and thank you to those of you who have, please do use the Q&A function to submit one. I will try and put as many of these to our guests as I can before our finish at about 1:20. Okay, with those pre-flight checks completed, let me introduce you to Travis and Freccia. Travis, hi, hopefully you can hear me. Do you just want to very briefly introduce yourself and Lumify Energy and sort of set the scene for us?
Yes, hi Angus. I'm Travis Ben. I'm co-founder and the technical director of Lumify Energy. I oversee the delivery of our services. So I work directly with our clients, predominantly landowners. And in terms of my background, I started as an auditor, working for Ernst & Young and Grant Thornton, had a wide variety of clients, and actually the minority of them were actually in the energy industry. But nevertheless, I moved into renewables about 10 years ago, working with the UK's largest independent renewable generator, which was a great business, punched above their weight, were preparing to be listed on the London Stock Exchange at the time. And then for the past 7 years, I've been working mainly with landowners, sort of local authorities, SMEs, listed companies, independent farmers, their professional advisors, and site operators. So I've, in terms of coming here, I've seen the perspective of both the site operator side of things and energy companies. Freccia, do you want to say a little bit about yourself as well?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Freccia Ben. I'm co-founder and head of strategy and innovation at Lumify Energy, and I oversee what we deliver to our clients and the way we deliver it. One of the things that we really try to do is make sure that everything is very simplified within the renewable energy sector, but we'll go on to that in exactly how we do that later on. I started my career in the medical field. I started my career as a dentist, very different from being an accountant. And I really enjoyed the strategic and the treatment planning and the marketing side of dentistry. I started my first business very soon after graduating. And I like a new challenge. So when Travis told me about the challenges in the renewable energy sector, I took the opportunity and I decided to help oversee the strategic aspects of the business.
Excellent. So from clean teeth to clean energy. So, I mean, rolling back a little bit, I mean, when you started, I mean, was it a particular problem that you identified that wasn't being met? Or was it something that a number of players were doing, but you just thought you could do it differently, if that makes sense?
Yeah, well, I would say the seed was first started about 10 years ago when I was working as an auditor, and I had a client at the Drax power station, and I was just fascinated with the business, finding about how they worked, and they actually recycled waste from the power generation process. And I could see myself working directly with clients like that in some capacity other than as their auditor that makes them nervous, coming along once a year. And so that planted a seed. And then after I moved into the renewables industry, I saw an opportunity where I think landowners they're crucial. They're crucial to these projects, but they didn't have a very loud voice in the industry. So I saw an opportunity to actually, speak on their behalf, work with them, partner with them to help them just get more involved in the industry and to have a greater say in how the projects are run and how they're performing.
And so can you give us sort of an example of 2 or 3 fairly typical projects that you're involved with now, or you have been involved, just to give us a flavour of the sort of depth and breadth of what you do?
Oh, yeah. Well, we typically work with landowners who have large commercial renewable energy projects on their land. So typically greater than 1 megawatt. It could be a independent landowner like a farmer or a local authority that's approached by a site operator to build a project on their land in return for a guaranteed rent over the next 15 to 30 years and under a sort of a revenue share agreement. So the energy would be sold to the grid and the income would be shared between the landowner and the site operator. So that could be a project like a wind farm. So we work with wind farms from, let's say, 1 megawatt up to 70 megawatts. It could also be energy from waste project like a landfill gas site or a hydro project. Those are the ones that we work with a lot at the moment. And so, we help the landowner effectively hold their hands at various stages throughout the life cycle of those projects. So, for example, at the start of the project, we'd help to build the relationship between the landowners and the site operators, advising on the appropriate rental rates for that, location type of project based on the current market conditions. And we'd advise them on the best commercial terms for their agreement. And we may even negotiate on behalf of the landowners, given, being industry insiders. So those are the kind of projects. As I said, we're involved in the various stages, not only at the start of the project, but during the project as well, and coming up to the end of the projects.
Well, that's interesting. So, I mean, typically, will it be landowners approaching you directly, or might they get referred on by other advisors? What's your sort of route to market, Travis?
Yes. Well, yeah, initially it was us identifying the landowners and approaching them and saying, look, we could really help you at various stages. But as time has gone on and as we've worked with landowners, we've developed more referrals, which has been fantastic. Once we've had a project, our landowners tend to know someone else that has a similar project, either 1 or 2, and then they'll pass us across. And then, the word of mouth has really done tremendous things for us over the past few years. Initially it was more difficult, obviously, targeting them from scratch, but word of mouth has been a big help.
And you were saying before about the sort of mix of renewables that you have been dealing with. I mean, has that changed since you've been in business? And if it has changed, has that been a conscious decision on your part to refocus, or has that just been the sort of evolution of the renewables scene in the UK?
Well, I would say that we have mainly focused on 3 technologies. The wind, wind, hydro, and landfill gas. But we are now looking to get involved in more solar projects, just because we've had a lot of landowners that have approached us. There's clearly opportunity there. Rather than, so we haven't shifted much in the technology since we've started, because a lot of our, there's lots of clients already in those technologies that need a lot of help, and we've really just been getting stuck in, and a lot of the work we do does look back historically. So as a new technologies come forward, it doesn't necessarily affect our clients straight away, but we have been changing the services that we provide to provide a greater range of services for our clients, which has really been well received. So we've been working on increasing the range of services before we then look to expand into more technologies.
And the landowners that you deal with, I mean, presumably there's sort of a broad range of them, from sort of local authorities, could be national trust, could be religious organizations, through to sort of private landowners. Is that a fair?
Yes, absolutely. A wide cross-section of landowners, as you mentioned. Yes, there are institutional landowners. For example, we work with organizations like United Utilities, the Church of England. We also work with a lot of SMEs like the Dewley cheesemakers in Lancashire, Tudor Griffiths, local authorities, a lot of independent landowners and farmers, but also their professional advisors, mainly land agents, solicitors, and even accountants.
Even accountants, right? We're at the bottom of the list. That's fine, Travis. And I mean, has the range of services that you've provided evolved? Because I mean, I know you've spoken about sort of helping landowners in their sort of commercial negotiations, but I mean, I think you're also getting involved in some of the sort of due diligence reporting at the initial stages. Is that right?
Well, yes. When we first started the business, a lot of our focus was on sort of forensically reviewing the rental payments and working with the site operators to correct any errors, any mistakes, and make sure the payments are fully up to date. And we used to report on how well the project is performing versus other similar sites across the UK, the environmental impact, that sort of thing of those projects. But then we saw that actually there are a lot of landowners that are now getting into the projects. So we thought, isn't there something we can do to help those people that are earlier in the journey? And so we started helping to just develop the relationships between the landowners and site operators, advising them on the appropriate sort of rental rates, best commercial terms, that sort of thing, negotiating on their behalf. And then we saw people coming towards the end of their project thinking about, look, should I bring it in-house? Should I extend my agreement with the current site operator, or should I get a new site operator coming on board? So we started advising on a range of things, and even look for energy from waste. Our clients would say, look, can you forecast the remaining life of the project and what value is left in the project? So we started getting involved in that, helping them to evaluate their options, also helping to facilitate handovers of those projects. So transferring like ROC accreditations, grid connections, environmental permits, things like that, and even renegotiating commercial terms on their behalf.
I'd like to add, I just wanted to say that actually it's been interesting, given the range of our clients and energy types, the pain points are pretty much the same. The pain points have essentially been that this isn't usually the landowner's primary area of business. So they're focusing on something completely different. They sometimes struggle in sort of trying to understand and speak the language of energy or renewable energy. And also the information isn't really easily accessible. And the landscape of renewable energy is always changing. So that's been quite interesting, given you'd think, a listed really big organization and a farmer, there's really not much difference. It's really been the information available and the time and the expertise. So that's been the uniform thing that we've seen throughout all of those energy types and all of those landowner types.
I mean, that's interesting you say that, Freccia. I mean, is there an extent to which that's true on both sides, that as well as sort of landowners saying, well, we're principally landowners, but we're going to have a look at a renewable project? I mean, is there some confusion amongst the energy providers because they're rushing in to try and increase the amount of renewables? I mean, are they sort of trying to get up to speed with all the latest rules and regulations around that as well?
I think, as you said, Angus, I think there are challenges on both sides. And as you said, in terms of a rush, I think the site operators done really well to, to scale up renewables over the years. And they face a lot of uncertainty, subsidy changes, etc., different rules that they've got to, and deadlines they've got to comply with in order to, from envisaging those projects to making them, commissioned and up and running. And they have a lot of challenges. And so, we've worked with them as well to help to make the process as smooth as possible. And they also have lots, because what tends to happen is a lot of work goes in the beginning to get those projects up and running, and then they can sort of, get forgotten about some aspects of the project, but particularly the bit between the landowners and the site operators. And then the site operators also having, big teams, and these projects, they're quite interdisciplinary. They cut across a lot of different areas. So it could be a site has been commissioned, and the engineers are on there working on it. That's now generating electricity, supplying to the grid. That doesn't necessarily get communicated to the finance team that, look, actually now we're earning income. The landowner should now be getting paid, for example, so they could be delayed in the start of that process, or a new engine's been added to the site, and that hasn't fed through into the calculations for the royalties, things like that. So, and for example, there's been changes in, let's say, the power purchase agreement. So the energy is now being sold to a different customer. And so there's changes in the sales terms and the pricing of that. Has that been fed through again throughout through the finance teams onto the payment side of things? So I would say certain aspects of the projects have run ahead of other areas, potentially the financial accounting side of things, the royalty accounting. And that's where we've added a lot of value by helping to sort of catch up and developing even our own kind of platform to help that process become a lot smoother, a lot more seamless, a lot more automated.
Gosh, how interesting. Well, if you're tuned in and if you've got a question you'd like to ask either Travis or Freccia, do please use the Q&A panel and send a question through. I mean, just going back to that, Travis, with the sort of platform for the payments and accounting for royalties. I mean, to what extent do you think landowners are going into these projects with their eyes wide open? I mean, Freccia was mentioning before about some of the sort of pain points. I mean, do you think people realize this really is, or it can be a very long-term commitment, especially with their land use?
Yeah, and that's a good question, Angus. I think that I think it's people are not aware of the complexity that's involved in making the payments, and how many different elements come together into those payments, and markets that are constantly changing, prices that are fluctuating, subsidies that are coming and going, the different aspects of the transmission and the local area networks. They have their methodology that's changed over time and is recently changed again. And all those things affect the payments. And, landowners, as Freccia said, they're not energy people. They don't speak the language of renewable energy necessarily. And when these agreements last over 30 years, typically 25 years, a lot of things change over that period of time. And a lot of times the people that set up the projects, even if we think about a local authority, maybe someone in that team had more of an energy sort of expertise. Over that period of time, people come and go. And these agreements don't necessarily track the changes that happen commercially over time. So I think, people do have to, it is more than a lot of landowners realize when they first get into it. And even some things as simple as where, they've got their site operator happens to be a vertically integrated energy supplier that maybe generates and supplies electricity. And that electricity may be being sold to a subsidiary. And there might be reasons why the price that it's being sold at might not be the typical market price. So, what's the royalty being based on? Sometimes it's not the arm's length market price, it's a discounted price. And landowners might not be aware of that over time. So there is many aspects to it that are often overlooked.
I mean, I could imagine that you will quite often sort of come across an agreement or a contract that is already in place, and you sort of look at it and think, well, blimey, well, you could have come to us and we could have got you a little bit more. I mean, I don't know, do these contracts operate with sort of break clauses? Are there opportunities for existing landowners with existing contracts still to be able to come to you and say, look, can you just give this a once over? Are we able to modify the terms? Does it work like that, or is that a bit naive on my part?
No. Great question, Angus. All of the above. All of the above. That's typically what happens. A client doesn't necessarily come to us when the project is now starting. It's already been running for a number of years. Maybe the payments are being made late, and then that puts them on notice. What's going on? Why is my payments always late? I'd quite like to have a look at this. I've been meaning to look at it, but I just didn't have the time or the expertise. When we look at the contracts, there's all sorts. So there could be, and there are contracts where that's it. That's the rate you've agreed, and that will remain for the remainder of the contract. But even then, there are opportunities to look at this and make sure everything is working correctly, because the language that's used to define even what is what's included in those payments, how it's defined, they're normally quite all-encompassing, quite broad. Oil and gas has this problem in America as well, where it's in the royalty agreements. Is it just the oil that's produced from your bit of land, or if you've got a neighboring land and it overlaps between the different area of land, what should be included, how should it be calculated, and at what stage in the process should it crystallize? So even in those contracts, in 75% of our reviews we find discrepancies, and work with site operators to correct those. But there are other contracts where they do have break clauses. So for example, it could be after the power purchase agreement changed, then there's an opportunity to have a review to the current market rate at that point in time. So we see a lot of those, and particularly where the industry has changed from the old non-fossil fuel obligation contracts to the renewable obligation contracts. So after sort of 15 years, that point in time arrived where those agreements changed, and say, we've had a look at a lot of those contracts to make sure that they've been renegotiated up to the current market rate.
Interesting. I mean, just before we start turning to sort of recent changes and future plans, and of course some questions from the audience are coming in now. I mean, how does it work from a financial point of view, from your point of view? I mean, do landowners, will you be sort of giving them a fixed fee to do something? Will it be on a time spent basis, or will you be negotiating sort of contingent fees? How does that commercial relationship with your clients work?
Yeah, well, we have done a variety of that, Angus. I mean, at the beginning, we were quite, being a startup business, you have the different pricing models that you start with, and you test in the market to see what works best for our landowners. So, there's somewhere we said, look, this, traditionally you think, well, this is the hourly rate, this is how much time we estimate it will bring, and this is how much we charge. Clients are happy with that. Potentially, if we're also delivering, we do a lot of reports. So we can, now we've got the experience, they see what value they're going to get. They can see how it's going to impact their negotiations. So fixed fee. Some have asked us to say, look, I'm not sure what I'll get out of this. Could you have a look? Can we do a sort of a contingent arrangement? So we've done that as well with landowners. So it has been a mixture. I think going forward, we're looking to do a sort of more of a subscription sort of basis, because as we've worked with a lot of landowners, they've said, look, actually, we'd like you to keep an eye on this. Could you at least once a year have a look through our accounts, see how everything is going as it should be, and we look to have like a retainer going forward. And I suspect the benefit for that is going back to what you and Freccia were saying before, because the rules and regs keep changing. Then what was adequate 4 or 5 years ago may need to be changed. I mean, geographically, I mean, do you tend to do a lot of work in particular areas of the UK, or do you think there are particular areas of the UK that really haven't quite got the opportunities that you're able to offer landowners there?
We work throughout the UK. I wouldn't say there's some technologies are more prevalent in some areas than others, but generally we work from Devon to Scotland to Cambridge, so really throughout the UK. We've worked, and I think in terms of an opportunity, I wouldn't say that there is a particular area that doesn't have the opportunity to work with us, especially now everything's gone online. I think it's a lot easier for people. So, yeah.
Okay, and just I mean, if we sort of wind back sort of 15, 16 months, and I know a lot of us in business are sort of doing that and thinking, gosh, if we could have changed something, how did we react? I mean, winding back, what impact did sort of that initial lockdown have? Was it sort of still business as usual? Was it sort of headless chicken time? Was it actually there are now opportunities? So what happened in your organization with COVID? What was the impact, short term and medium term?
There was a mixture, actually. So we have obviously our institutional landowners, and they were all working from home. So I think they had to adjust. Some of our landowners in that way had to adjust and getting in touch with them, and setting up their phone systems. So communication was a little bit sketchy there sometimes. But I think most people are used to working from home now, and are back in the office also. And I found that our independent landowners, so in particular farmers, I found that because a lot of them were in very rural areas, it was really pretty much business as usual. So I found, we found that working with them, that it didn't have much of an impact in that way. I think one of the positives for us that came out of it, although obviously the situation was difficult for everyone, was it allowed us to slow down and rethink things. Hence our rebrand. We decided to go ahead and rebrand during that time when everything slowed down. We had an opportunity also, because everyone was at home and slowed down, to actually speak to and get really interview some of our clients to actually find out what it is that they really want, and if there's anything that we could provide more of. Hence the added solutions that we now offer, and hence and the direction of our new brand. So that was something that we found, and also we found that we're now working more globally. So we're working with people around the world more. It's just become normalized. Jumping on a Zoom call is quite normal now, right? So we've got people that are working within Australia. Ordinarily, we would have been working with someone in Devon would have maybe seemed a little bit too far, but with Zoom now, nothing's too far really.
So that's really interesting, Freccia, in terms of sort of evolution of the business. You're saying, I mean, once you sort of had to sort of hang up your Wellington boots, that the site visits were no longer there. It was an opportunity to say, look, if we are sort of screen to screen, does that give us any opportunities to develop additional services? That's really interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely, and a lot of our clients are a lot more comfortable with that now. I feel that the pandemic pushed people into, we had clients who ordinarily would have said to us would never have gone onto Zoom, and now, because I had one particular client that said, she's now having to communicate with her children and her grandchildren via Zoom. She was so comfortable and used to it that now actually the prospect of speaking to us is absolutely fine. She's more than happy to speak to us on Zoom, so it has really pushed people to doing more online.
But it has been strange with Freccia having Zoom calls at 8 and 9 p.m. with Australia, or getting up at the crack of dawn to make those calls. But I found a lot of our clients as well during that time, they just tightened up their belts. So, which was more business for us, whether it's a farmer or, they just wanted to look at their finances in greater detail because of the uncertainty that was coming. And some of them were looking to bring their projects in-house, the ones that were coming towards the end of their agreement, so that they can extract more value from those projects. So we were able to get involved a lot in those areas.
How interesting. And in terms of sort of where you go from now, I mean, is it actually COVID has allowed you to sort of crystallize what the business is doing, how you do it, where you do it, and then you're just going to continue from here? Or is a process saying, well, we want to revert to some of the things that we were doing pre-lockdown?
Yeah, I think we'll build on the changes that have happened. I think those opportunities, it opened our eyes to those opportunities. So whereas, like we're talking about the increased range of services, I think we would have stayed a lot more on providing the things that we were already doing. So getting involved in these other areas of the project, for example, where the projects are coming to the end, we'll look to do that a lot more and open our clients' eyes to those opportunities that are available to them at the end of the projects that they may not have been thinking about. They may have just thought, well, we'll just either just extend the current agreement, maintain the status quo and keep it rolling. But actually, there could be more that you could do. So we'll look to do that. I think we'll continue to go more digital. We've been able to have a greater pool of suppliers to choose from, being open to people that are working in Australia and different parts of the world. So we'll look to do that more and just try to manage our best with the time difference. We'll digitize more of our documents. So, engagement letters, all those things of now we've got all these different platforms that makes it easier for our farmers to sign off a long engagement letter. And we'll just look to digitize, more of our reports going forward. I think we'll do more of that. We'll complete the rebrand, which I think we're almost there now, Freccia, aren't we, with the rebrand and communicating that to our clients?
Yeah, we're definitely going online more. We'll be launching our new blog, the Green Light, and the podcast that goes along with that. We'll be launching that a lot more because we know that a lot more people, I think, started to listen to podcasts in the pandemic and became a lot more aware of podcasting. So we'll be launching that soon, and just providing as much information for people within this space as possible, really.
Fantastic. So watch this space. Turning to a few of the questions that have come in from the audience. One question submitted in advance was what normally drives the establishment of a green energy provision? Is it the landowner or the firm with the expertise? And then a bit of detail also, where is the driving force behind ACAES, which I think is advanced compressed air energy storage, and weighing up that compared to batteries. But I mean, perhaps the main thrust of that is, who initiates this provision? I don't know who would like to answer that.
I think in terms of the type of, in our context and the type of work that we do, it would be, sort of like the royalty provisions and things like that within the accounts. And that would normally be driven by the site operators. They would be the ones that are responsible for reporting on the performance of the projects and any liabilities that would be attached to that, whether it's the royalties or decommissioning, things like that. So they would drive that. And I would say landowners are normally, they just leave them to go ahead and make those decisions. In terms of what drives it, I would say it's the contractual agreements, the lease agreement that's in place, particularly with the royalties. It would be the lease agreement between the landowner and the site operator that drives that liability. And I would say the normal rules for recognizing liabilities or provision would apply, legal obligation, past event reliably measured, future outflows of economic benefits, that sort of thing. And in terms of, again, estimating it, I'd look at the estimated volume of electricity to be generated and the value perhaps per kilowatt hour. But then you might have instances, which we do have, where those contracts, there are grey areas in it surrounding the recognition of the revenue and what could and should be classified as revenue versus some other sort of other type of sort of negative cost that might not be treated as revenue as such. So sometimes there are areas of dispute about what can be included, and maybe look at whether there's an implied term in the contract, whether some of those the arguments for including some additional revenue, is it necessary for like business efficacy? We'd look at the usual industry standards and practices, and perhaps the legitimate expectations of the parties and that sort of thing. But a lot of it is driven by the contractual terms and the period of time that they might have to provide that, hold that for.
Okay, that's great. And there was a sort of mention in the question of that sort of advanced compressed air energy storage. I'm guessing that's an area you've got less experience than you have in the three that you mentioned before. Is that right?
Yeah, we predominantly work with, I would say, more sort of well-established technologies. wind farms, hydro, landfill, that sort of thing. So I'm not familiar with this technology, unfortunately. None of our clients are currently using it. So I couldn't really comment on the nuances of it.
Fine. One other question, which I think is quite specific and I think does fall a bit outside your area. What constitutes trading for tax purposes for household produced energy? I suspect that is more of a tax practitioner question in terms of yes, as a private householder, when you start getting taxed when you are considered to be actually selling that. So I think that falls slightly outside your area as well. Travis, let's try this question that has come in. It says, the feed-in tariffs certainly sound complicated. Does the invoicing process work for the business? Is it self-invoicing by energy user? When do the receivables accrue? Is that something you want to have a go with, Travis or Freccia?
Okay, on the spot. We have a minority of clients that have this sort of on the feed-in tariff scheme. Most of the larger clients are on the ROC scheme, but they tend to. It's normally every 3 months that they would take the meter readings, and they would self-invoice the energy supplier for the amount of energy that's been generated. So yeah, they would normally, it's now set up in a way that a lot of the energy suppliers will have an area of their website. You would just log on, you'd submit the meter readings, and they would show the opening and closing readings from the current and the previous period, and they just calculate how many kilowatt hours have been generated, and they'll have the rate that just increases every April with RPI, etc. Depending on what tariff you started on, they just work out what your quarterly bill will be, and then they'll make a payment. It's normally quite seamless. I think there have been challenges from landowners where sometimes the meter goes. I forgot the term they use, but it goes past the meter. So the meter's got a certain number of digits that it can record. And after that, then you can put in another reading and the system automatically flags up an error. And sometimes landowners have sort of a little bit of frustration when they try and get in touch with some of the site operators who have tried to automate the process. But when you have a question that's outside of the norm, and then they try and sort of get certain queries, they can feel a little bit hard to reach and speak to a kind of someone that's, speak to a person rather than the automated system. So I hope that.
Yep, no, that's good. Another question that's just come in, I think a bit of a nice sort of reflective question. Obviously, you've got a lot of knowledge and experience in this field now, but how did you manage when you first set up your business and were finding your way? So who wants to sort of think about that in terms of, constantly keeping your knowledge up to date and understanding more about the industry?
Yeah, I think, Freccia, I'll take a stab and you just jump in and help me. I think at the beginning it was definitely, it was, as with any startup business, it's really challenging. There's so much to be done, and you have to usually, before you have a team, you have to get involved in everything, all different aspects of the business, really roll up your sleeves. And I guess it's been great actually working as a couple. Actually, we really worked well together as a husband and wife, which is probably quite unusual, but it works.
Sorry, you're sounding surprised at that, Travis. I think we've got to be very careful, all of us here.
Well, I think, as a family business, there's a lot you have to do, and there is a lot of overlap, especially in the early stages of who does what. And you can end up stepping on each other's toes quite often at the beginning. And then who has the final say? Freccia doesn't always think that, and so there was some challenges right at the beginning.
Don't make Freccia put you on mute, Travis, at this point. Freccia, what about you in terms of reflecting back and also taking this point about sort of running a business as a married couple?
As a married couple, as Travis said, yes, we did step on each other's toes to start with. But I think the thing that we learned to do, and the thing that helped us tremendously, was actually identifying our core strengths individually. And it was actually in a strange way, we kind of split the business up. We split it up and we put it into departments, even though it was just the two of us. And we said, okay, this is your area, this is my area. And as Travis mentioned, that sort of final say, it was a lot easier to do things that way when we recognized that, you know, when we recognized each other's strengths and who would be better at doing certain things. So that made working as a couple a lot easier. We do try, you know, to switch off at the end of the day. It's difficult, but we do try to, you know, switch off at the end of the day and, you know, and not take work home. But it can be challenging. And going back to the question in terms of how we started and how we got going, one of the things that I would say is, because this is my second business, so one of the things I would say that we did was we started small and we started with what we had. I think you sometimes have an idea and you think that a business is going to go a certain way in a certain direction, and it doesn't. So the thing that we learned was it was always about testing. It was putting certain ideas out and seeing what worked, seeing what our clients responded to, what they wanted, and really listening to them. So that was something that we've adopted, you know, really just testing and just starting small and building from there, and you know, trying to, you know, find your product market fit. So that was something that we did early on, and, you know, how we got going.
Yeah. Gosh, brilliant, excellent. And just, I mean, we are sort of approaching the end. Freccia, do you want to just give us sort of 30 seconds? I mean, if we were to sort of check in again, Lumify Energy in 5 years' time, what would we see?
So I'm overseeing a part of the business which is looking at we're further developing our platform, the Lumograph. And this aims to be sort of an end-to-end payment system for site operators and landowners, and to make the process really seamless and really simple, and to really help drive the simplicity, you know, sort of really try to help simplifying the whole process, and to help with the information sharing, and to making things really transparent between the two, and really helping the partnership between the landowner and the site operators. So that's what we would see in 5 years' time.
Fantastic. And really sort of immediately now, Travis, I mean, in terms of what would a good lead look like if any of us sort of tuned in now are thinking, oh, hang on, who do we need to be thinking about if we want to sort of refer them on to you? Who?
I would say any landowner that has a renewable energy project. It could be any technology that is commercial scale. So I would say anything above, let's say, 500 kilowatts. I would say, you know, they've got a site, and they're about to go ahead with the site. So it may be at the beginning they haven't quite signed the agreement to accept the project and to start the planning. Mm-hmm. We can get involved and we can help them, guide them through what's going to be involved and how to get all the right agreements in place. It could be someone that's already got a site up and running. It has been running for many years, and they've never really looked at it in real minute detail. Mm. We can have a look at that for them and let them know how it's performing.
Fantastic. Well, that is great. How interesting. Well, I say we are hurtling towards our finish time. I'd just like to again thank you, Freccia and Travis. Thank you for your time this afternoon. Please check out their new rebranded website at lumifyenergy.co.uk. Thank you to Linda from ICAEW, who is, as you can see, up on the flight deck right now, producing this session and making sure the technology has worked. And of course, a thank you to all of you for joining us today. I do hope the session has given you a little bit of food for thought. The recording, once it's produced, will be shared through social media and on ICAEW's website. Just search for Pandemic Perspectives. And if you do find your way to that bit of the website, you will find a back catalogue of these sessions, a real cornucopia of content. I think 40 or so sessions so far from the last year or so, ranging from conversations with AstraZeneca, BAE Systems, and Chester Zoo, just to give you the ABC of it. We will send out a feedback form in due course. Please do. Any and all thoughts are very welcome. Next sessions coming up, well, 11th of May needs to be in your diary for the next Pandemic Perspectives. We're going to be hearing from Ralph Findlay, FCA and CEO at Marston's, the brewer and pub operator. For those of you in the Midlands region, don't forget your series of member meetups. For those working in the farming sector, charities, tourism, hospitality, or those of you working as NEDs. And if you are in London, then don't forget our next event is Business Bite Size on the 2nd of June. 3 speakers, each with 12 minutes to give us a blast on their area of expertise. This time the topics are the role of social media in business crisis management, London's economic recovery, and of course the current BEIS consultation on corporate governance. Hopefully you can join me at that. Just head to the events page at ICAEW.com for these and more. Goodness, with all that content, who on earth would want lockdown to end? Anyway, that is it from us. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. Take care and see you all again very soon. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Bye.